Part 80. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 793. When the parcel from the capital was delivered, Xiao Xiang was chasing after him in the farm with his new friends, when he heard his servant shouting from a distance, "Little prince, I have a letter from you." The little bear jumped 3 feet high, and excitedly told his friends, "Brother Xiaobao sent me money, and I will treat you to candy tomorrow." Little Xiang bid farewell to his new friends, and ran home first. Zhu Zi waved to them, and hurriedly pulled Danner to follow. Goiger followed behind panting, shouting, "Wait for me, wait for me." Zuzu rolled his eyes, dragged Danner to run faster, and made a face back, saying, "I told you to be lazy, you deserve it." Little Xiang has already rushed to the main courtyard, and Mu Yangling is distributing the letters. Qi Heiran put aside Qi Heiran's letter, and took out the letters written by Li Jinghua and Xiao Xia to her. The remaining big package was Little Bear of. Mu Yangling waited curiously. It felt quite heavy, and he really wanted to take it apart to have a look. His son rushed in like a cannonball. Mu Yangling raised the package as if nothing had happened, and said, "Son, the package your brother Xiaobao gave you." Little Xiang didn't have a sense of privacy yet, so with a happy "Ow-wow," he rushed up and hugged him in his arms. As soon as he kicked off his shoes, he climbed onto the couch and began to dismantle them. Inside was a box, which was not locked, and it opened with a slight twist. The box was opened, and on it were a letter for Little Bear and a few pieces of paper. Gold nuggets. He poured them out and counted them, but in the end he couldn't count them, so he could only ask his mother for help. "Mother, how much money is there?" But Mu Yangling picked up the banknote that he had put aside, and said with a smile, "Silly son, this is the big guy." Looking at the gold and silver coins again, it can be seen that they were cut from large pieces of silver and gold with scissors. She asked Li Shun to get a scale, weighed it in front of Little Bear, and said, "There are 12 taels of silver, and 5 taels of gold." Mu Yangling asked him to read the letter, and Xiao Xiang also needed to ask his mother for help when reading the letter, so he unfolded it generously, which was different from his letter full of ink dots. On the whole, the shape of the characters can be seen. Mu Yangling read it to him, and Xiao Xiang combined his own understanding. It was not difficult to read a letter. The last piece of paper was a picture of 2 vivid children with their fists bumping together to make a blood alliance. His eyes lit up, and he pointed at one of the round-headed children and shouted, "This is me, this is me." Mu Yangling guessed that Qi Xiaoyuan helped draw it, and nodded with a smile, "It's you and brother Xiaobao, the painting really looks alike." The little bear was so happy that he couldn't see his eyes. He looked at the painting on his stomach and asked his mother, "Is it cute?" "Cute." Satisfied, Little Bear put away the letter and painting cherished, ran into his room, took out a small box from the bedside table, put the letter and painting away, and then locked it. There was a letter written by Xiaobao in it. Originally, the child would throw it away after reading it, but once he saw his father put Uncle Wang's letter in this way, he immediately rolled over and asked for a box, and put Xiaobao's letter in the same way. Woke up, and wrote a letter to Xiaobao, asking him to accept his letter in the same way. At this moment, Little Xiang put away the letter before running out, picked up the banknotes he didn't understand, and braggingly said to his mother, "Brother Xiaobao gave it to me, I have so much money." Mu Yangling laughed and asked, "Then do you still remember what brother Xiaobao said?" "Remember, the school will be called Baoxiang School from now on." Looking at the letters from his younger brother and sister-in-law, Qi Xiaoyuan figured it out immediately. He felt that he should also train his son. Moreover, this country will be passed on to Xiaobao in the future, so that he can be exposed to the hardships of the people since he was a child and cultivate a benevolent heart. There is nothing wrong with Yide, so Qi Xiaoyuan encouraged Xiaobao to hand over his assets to Xiao Xiang to set up schools, and those schools will be counted as 2 people. The two children have been separated all the time. Chi Xiaoyuan was worried that they would be estranged. Now they can exchange letters twice a month, but as they get older, the letters will become less and less. Now they have things in common. Are more closely connected. Little Treasure had long been aroused by the fact that Little Bear was running a school. Almost as soon as his father mentioned it, he packed up all the money he had on him and planned to send it to Little Bear. Naturally, it was impossible to send such a heavy thing in this way, so Chi Xiaoyuan asked him to exchange gold and silver with him for a silver note of the same value. In the end, Little Treasure was worried that brother Little Bear had no money to buy candy, so he generously cut a few pieces of gold and silver for him to use as pocket money, and asked him to invest all the money in the construction of the school. At this time, Xiaobao hadn't realized the importance of gold and silver, and he didn't feel bad at all when he gave away all his assets, just like picking up a piece of pastry from the table and giving it to someone, but that piece of pastry was very precious. Seeing his son's appearance, Chi Xiaoyuan woke up secretly. As a prince, he naturally couldn't be stingy, but he also couldn't help but know how expensive and rare gold and silver are. Like him, the king of a country, one piece of silver can be broken into 2 petals. The son understands the value of gold and silver, so he needs to make him realize how difficult it is to live without gold and silver, so Chi Xiaoyuan didn't remind him to leave some silver for self-defense, and went to tell the queen not to allow her to subsidize his son in private. Only then did she feel sorry for her son's lack of money, and the queen, who wanted to send him money, was taken aback for a moment, and had no choice but to keep the money. As a result, Xiao Xiong became rich and Xiao Bao became poor, but Xiao Bao didn't realize how this affected him. Here, Mu Yangling helped his son calculate the money and keep accounts, and said, "Now that you have money, you can't spend it randomly, because although you have built a school and hired a teacher, you haven't bought them books or pens and ink. Paper ink stones, they are too poor to afford these things, so you have to pay for them yourself." So Xiaoxiang's money went to some more. This is the result of Mu Yangling picking up books from his own bookstore and giving him a 20% discount for Xiaoxiang's face. Otherwise, the cost will be even greater. Mu Yangling told the truth. He said, "You and Xiaobao should thank me very much, I have saved you a lot of money." Xiao Xiong pouted and looked at the banknote drawn by his mother. Half of the money he got was gone. He felt so sad. What should he do? But Mu Yangling turned a blind eye and wrote down the money in the account book, saying, "This is the cost of building the school. Later, you can send a copy to Brother Xiaobao. Since the school has half of Brother Xiaobao, how about the money? The spending must be open and clear, and you must let him know where your money is spent. If there is anything in the school, you have to discuss it with Brother Xiaobao. Since there are too many trivial things like this, you can apply with your father when he comes back. A carrier pigeon, just for the communication between the two of you brothers." Xiao Xiong, who was still sad about spending too much money, suddenly became happy when he heard the words, clapped his little hands and said, "I'll wait for Daddy at the gate." Go, go." Mu Yangling didn't feel sorry for him at all, and just said, "Remember not to stuff the snow around your neck or inside your clothes." Then he let the boy look after him, and then let him go. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 794. Little Bear pestered Chi Heiran for 3 days, served him tea and water obediently, and even brought him foot washing water at night, and squatted on the ground to wash his father's feet. A carrier pigeon, responsible for delivering letters between him and Xiaobao. Excitedly, Little Bear wrote a letter to Xiaobao that night, telling him the good news. By the way, he told him that he had decided to name the school as Baoxiang Academy, and then put the letter in under the guidance of his father. The small bamboo tube was stuffed and tied to the pigeon's leg, letting it deliver a letter to Xiaobao. Xiaobao exclaimed when he received the letter from the carrier pigeon, and he didn't take a nap anymore. He hugged the carrier pigeon and kissed him twice. After reading the letter, he took something to feed it himself. Chi Xiaoyuan took everything into his eyes, and watched the two children discuss the name of the school, the students to be recruited, the teachers to invite, and the courses taught by the pigeons. Up. Xiaobao could only go to his father with the pigeons in his arms, and begged him to send them 2 more pigeons, so that they could come alternately. Chi Xiaoyuan had a headache. Before, he was worried that the two children would be separated from each other, but now, how could they be unfamiliar? The two brats can't wait to grow together. As long as the pigeon comes back, Xiaobao will write a letter, and here, he can receive a letter from the pigeon every 3 or 4 days. Obviously, the bear is in the same state as Xiaobao. They only let the pigeons rest for 1 night. No matter how many words there are, it should be finished in this month, right? However, the two children ate something delicious, their husbands slapped their palms when they couldn't finish their homework, and the baby in the mother's stomach kicked 3 times today. Such trivial things have to be written, and there are new topics every day. Especially Xiaoxiang, I don't know how Heiran and Aling taught him. What did the letters they wrote say? The cow raised by Dehai's family for 8 years fell ill. In order to treat the cow's disease, Dehai's father wanted to sell his sister. The snow began to melt, and the farmer's uncles started plowing the fields, and the older children were driven back to work by adults. Can no longer go to the school, he took someone directly to the house and snatched him out. It made Xiaobao burst into tears, and asked him at dinner, "Father, why do you have to sell a cow when it's sick? Are cows more important than people? If I have a younger sister, even if all the cows are sick, I won't sell her either." Chi Xiaoyuan could only clench his chopsticks bitterly. What would he tell his son? Do you mean that cattle are very important property in farmers' households, or is it that women have a low status in the family? Or tell him how miserable his people were under his rule. Chi Xiaoyuan closed his eyes and said, "These royal fathers don't understand either, so you have to find the answer yourself." The queen looked at him in surprise. Chi Xiaoyuan lowered his eyes, picked up a piece of chicken for him, and said, "So Emperor, you should eat more, grow up quickly, and tell father when you find the answer." Xiaobao nodded fiercely, "Father, don't worry, I will tell you the reason when I find out." The two children's topics were too complicated and wide-ranging for adults to understand, but this did not prevent Chi Xiaoyuan from seeing Xiaobao's growth. His son, who originally just followed the gentleman to study every day, suddenly became full of energy. "If I ask my husband what it means to teach without discrimination, I will also go to his bedroom at night and nestle in his arms, curiously asking him the difference between millet and rice. He would try his best to hide every penny he got, and then plan what to do with the money, and then write to Little Bear to teach him one by one, and even made a plan without a teacher." So even if Chi Xiaoyuan was sometimes stopped by the two children and would be saddened by their questions, he still expressed his support and dialed 2 more pigeons for them, so that the two children could communicate unimpeded. This made Chi Heiran jealous. You must know that homing pigeons are not so easy to cultivate, even military pigeons are not so casually used. Chi Heiran couldn't help but apply for 2 more with Chi Xiaoyuan. Chi Xiaoyuan and Chi Heiran, who were as warm as a spring breeze to Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang, were not polite at all. Not only did he ruthlessly reject his application, but he also asked him to quickly build the Luo Dianwei house. Military pigeons. Along with the letter to Chi Heiran, there was also a letter he wrote to Mu Yangling. Chi Heiran's eyes widened when he received the letter, and he almost stared out 2 holes in the envelope, but he was very sure that it was the elder brother's handwriting, not the Empress's. Chi Heiran took the letter and frowned to find Mu Yangling. "My elder brother also wrote letters to Ling before, but that was before Aling married him. After Aling married him, whenever my elder brother wanted to say anything to Ling, he would directly tell him in the letter and let him pass it on. And if Aling wanted to tell his eldest brother, it was through his letter, so it was the first time that he wrote directly to Aling. So Chi Heiran pinched the letter in confusion to find Mu Yangling, wondering if something serious had happened, and it was hard for the elder brother to tell him, so he told Aling directly. He considers himself the head of the family, and he has nothing to hide from him, so after giving the letter to Mu Yangling, he stood in front of her in a daze. Happy to open it, and muttered while opening it, "Why did you think of writing me a letter, brother?" "Yes, I also really want to know," Chi Heiran murmured in his heart, moved his feet quietly, stood behind Mu Yangling, and stretched his neck to look. Chi Ziyuan held back for several days, and he was too embarrassed to write to Mu Yangling because he couldn't hold it anymore. He was wrong about this, so he was naturally embarrassed to go through his younger brother, so he wrote to Mu Yangling directly. He wants to requisition Mu Yangling's cattle farm. Of course, it's not for free. He will give her some land and gold and silver as compensation, but it has developed into the largest cattle farm in the north, with more than 5,000 adult cattle and an annual output of small. The cattle farm with more than 600 cattle obviously cannot be compensated by land and gold and silver, so he is very embarrassed. But what his son asked him that day echoed in his mind from time to time. For farmers, cattle are more important than life. It sounds touching, but it is also very sad. What makes people even inferior to cattle? Poverty. How many cows are there in the country? As long as you read the documents of the Ministry of Households, you will know that there are not many, and the largest one is Mu Yangling's cattle farm in the Northland. I don't know how many officials in the court are staring at that cattle farm. It is really exciting. Do not have? The total number of cattle in the entire south of the Yangtze River is no more than this number, which shows how big Mu Yangling's cattle farm is. If the cattle in the cattle farm can be divided into various places so that the cattle can be used to the fullest, the cultivation rate will be a little higher. Although it is still a drop in the bucket from the national point of view, if there is too much water, it will become a river. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 795. Chi Ziyuan also had the audacity to write a letter to Mu Yangling for several days, but Mu Yangling didn't think too much about it. Half of the reason for building the cattle farm was to make money, and half of it was because he couldn't bear the pain of the farmers. Now she is not very short of money, and the value of the farm that Chi Ziyuan exchanged is not less than the cattle farm. What she has to consider is whether the cattle farm can maximize its benefits in the hands of the court. The result is that there are too many interest entanglements in the imperial court, and it is better to be in private hands or in the hands of the royal family. Mu Yangling knocked on the table and sighed, "There are so few people in the royal family, you can't even find someone in charge of the cattle farm. Big Brother has a lot of capable people who can't become officials. It's not difficult to find someone who is loyal to the royal family, and the people in the cattle farm are already, just let them continue to raise cattle in the cattle farm." But, Chi Haoran frowned and said, "Can father-in-law agree to give the cattle farm to the royal family?" Mu Yangling blinked and asked, "Why do I need my father's consent? The cattle farm is my dowry." Chi Heiran coughed lightly, and asked in a low voice, "You really don't need to ask your father-in-law." Chi Heiran shook his head, "I can decide this matter." She smiled and said, "Even if the elder brother doesn't mention it, sooner or later the cattle farm and the nursery will be handed over to the royal family. However, it has a great influence. You have a large army now, and now my father is the general in Baidi." No one said anything now. It doesn't mean that no one will have any opinions in the future, these things have to be dealt with early. Seeing Chi Heiran frowning, she took his hand and said, "I know that you have a good relationship with elder brother will not doubt you, and you will not have wrong thoughts, but we must always think about future generations. You have too much support and prestige, and the courtiers with ulterior motives are provoking the children, so you dare to pat your chest and guarantee that they will be like you and your eldest brother. Chi Heiran remained silent. The cattle farm has developed well in the past few years. Nearly one-third of the people no longer rent cattle, but buy them back. Now that the cattle farm has reached its peak, it's okay to divert them out, as long as they keep enough for a certain number of cows. The number will develop again after 2 or 3 years. Mu Yangling turned around and picked out the account books of the cattle farm last year from the bookshelf, and said, "But I do not agree to nationalize the cattle farm. There are too many interest entanglements. If the cattle farm is controlled by officials from the DPRK and China, then the cattle in the cattle farm will probably go to those rich counties and wealthy families first, which is not in line with our original intention." "So what do you mean?" "Led by the royal family, this cattle farm belongs to the royal family." Mu Yangling smiled brightly, and said, "I have always disliked that there are too few cattle farms, and the north is sparsely populated. When the Jin people retreated, they left a lot of pastures. Now they are all abandoned there. If the cattle farm is classified as the royal family, then 2 more can be built, and there are many technicians in the cattle farm now, and the operation of the cattle farm will not be affected if some of them are allocated." Chi Heiran looked at her with burning eyes, making Mu Yangling's face blush slightly. She raised her face and asked proudly, "What do you see me doing?" "Aling, you were so beautiful just now." "I haven't seen you so beautiful for a long time." Whenever she talked about something she was good at, there seemed to be a radiance on her face. She was so proud and confident that it made people palpitate. "It's better to put people on the bed and eat them alive." Mu Yangling's face became more and more ruddy, but he glared at him, but he didn't know that his eyes were moist, soft, and had no deterrent power at all. Chi Heiran laughed, stepped forward, picked her up and put her on his lap, and asked in a low voice, "If the cattle farm and nursery are handed over to you, can you take care of them? Didn't you say it was going to be given to the royal family?" Chi Heiran bit her earlobe lightly, and whispered, "Aren't you also a member of the royal family?" After Mu Yangling became pregnant, her body became more sensitive. She shook and struggled to leave Chi Heiran's embrace. Chi Heiran held her hand slightly, hugged her tightly, and said in a hoarse voice, "Don't move." He put his earlobe in his mouth as soon as the words fell, bit his teeth lightly, and said in a low voice, "You are my wife, now besides our brothers and the emperor's wife, you are the most suitable person to be in power. What's more, the cattle farm and nursery are your dowry in the first place, and if you take care of them, no one can say anything." Mu Yangling shrank his neck and said, "Let go of me first, let's sit and talk." Chi Heiran hugged her and laughed twice. The heat spread on her neck, making Mu Yangling's face even redder, and even his neck was like the glow of the sky. Chi Heiran's breathing was a little rough. He carried her directly to the main room, and whispered in her ear, "It's 4 months, I remember the imperial doctor said that the pregnancy is stable at 3 months. Mu Yangling's face was like clouds. He stretched out his hand to pinch his waist, and said in a low voice, "Put me down quickly, so that people will see me." Chi Heiran, on the other hand, carried him back to the house without hearing anything, and the girls and women he saw along the way stood respectfully aside, waiting for the person to walk away before he dared to move again. When Li Shun saw the prince carrying the concubine back like this, he thought something had happened, but seeing the prince's calm face, he felt a little relieved, and hurriedly opened the curtain to let the 2 of them in. Chi Heiran told her, "You all go down, I don't need you to wait on me." Li Chun paused, respectfully responded, and pulled the girls back. Mu Yangling was so ashamed that he couldn't lift his face. When did Chi Heiran become so shameless? Chi Heiran gently put him on the bed, ignoring his wife's hand pinching his waist. With Aling's strength, it would be easy for her to pinch him until he couldn't walk like being bitten by an ant. It can be completely ignored, so Chi Heiran really ignored it. He looked at Mu Yangling with a smile, put down the curtain, hugged her in his arms, held her lips, and untied her clothes gently with his hands. Chi-Heiran straightened up and kissed his wife's forehead. Seeing the fine sweat on her temples, he smiled slightly, stretched out his hand to wipe it off, and then gently covered her with the quilt, but he just lay down and hugged her with the quilt in his arms. When I wanted to sleep, I heard the sound of running outside. Only one dared to run like this outside his bedroom, but his footsteps were so fine. Chi-Heiran stood up helplessly. As soon as he put on his pants, Little Bear rushed in. He stared wide-eyed at his naked father, shouted, "Daddy, it's so cold." Chi-Heiran let out a shh, and whispered, "Your mother is still sleeping, let's go outside and talk." Little Xiang was very puzzled, followed his father out, and asked curiously when he got outside, "Mother, why is she sleeping again?" "I accompanied her during the afternoon nap." Chi-Heiran coughed lightly, and said, "It's your younger brother who wanted to sleep, so she fell asleep. That's all right. What are you doing in such a hurry?" Little Bear looked at his father aggrieved. "It's time for dinner, I'm so hungry, when can I have dinner?" It was only then that Chi-Heiran realized that he had been tossing around, and he didn't even remember to eat dinner. He coughed lightly, touched his head, and said, "You go to the dining room and wait for me. Daddy will come to eat with you in a while." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 796. Mu Yangling slept until midnight. She was woken up by hunger. Chi-Heiran woke up as soon as she moved. He hurriedly sat up and said, "Are you hungry? The bone porridge is hot outside, let me get you a bowl." Mu Yangling was so hungry that his hands and feet were weak, and he hummed. Chi-Heiran hurriedly got up and lit the lamp, and brought in a bowl of porridge from outside, but he fed her half a bowl of water before starting to feed her porridge. When Mu Yangling felt his hands were strong, he took the bowl and ate it by himself. She ate 3 big bowls in one go, and filled several pieces of snacks before stopping. Chi-Heiran was afraid that she would eat too much accumulated food, so seeing her stop and hurriedly moved the snack plate away, he said, "Would you like to come down and take 2 steps to digest food?" "No." Mu Yangling lazily leaned against the head of the bed, yawned, and said with narrowed eyes, "I still want to sleep." Chi-Heiran knows that Aling has been like this since she was pregnant. She sleeps almost 10 out of 12 hours a day. This period is not bad. During the first 3 months, she almost never opened her eyes, except for eating and drinking. Almost all in bed. Chi-Heiran also somewhat regretted the mischief this afternoon, which made her miss her mealtime. Usually, she can stay awake for about half an hour after eating, and she will not go to sleep until she has digested. Although distressed, Chi-Heiran still didn't let her continue to lie down, but put her clothes on and carried her to the couch covered with a thick blanket, saying, "We should digest our food first before going to sleep, otherwise you will feel bad tomorrow." Mu Yangling found a comfortable position in his arms, closed his eyes, and responded softly. Seeing her helpless like this, Chi-Heiran reached under her clothes, rubbed her stomach lightly, and muttered, "I knew I wouldn't let you eat so much just now." But looking at Aling who was eating so deliciously, Chi-Heiran was not willing to snatch the things, just like seeing people sleeping soundly now, he was not willing to wake them up. His hand was kicked lightly suddenly, Chi-Heiran paused, and stroked along the bump. The child who had been motionless seemed to feel his touch, and kicked him again. Chi-Heiran became excited and was about to wanting to lure him to move more. Mu Yangling frowned slightly, quickly withdrew his hands, and coaxed the child in a low voice, "My good son, go to bed quickly, your mother is already asleep." Seeing that the child in her stomach didn't respond, she gently rubbed her belly. After confirming that Mu Yangling was feeling better, she carried her back to the bed and held her tightly in her arms. The couple leaned their heads against each other. Head fell asleep. Chi-Heiran didn't go to the barracks the next day, and asked her, "Do you want to take care of the cattle farm and the nursery?" If you want to take care of me, tell your elder brother and ask him to allocate a few people for you. The record of the court is under the name of the royal family, and it will be under your control. Mu Yangling nodded, yes, now Bowen is still helping in the nursery, so I can continue to take care of it, so as not to change it in the hands of others, and those children have already gotten used to the current rules. Chi Heiran nodded, and decided to write a letter to Chi Ziyuan in a while. Little Xiong looked back and forth curiously at his parents while eating breakfast. Mu Yangling noticed his gaze and asked with a smile, "What's wrong with you?" The little bear put down the flour roll, and said, "Mom, I won't go out to play in the afternoon, I'll come back and sleep with you." After saying that, he smiled at his father flatteringly, "Daddy, this way you don't have to rush back to sleep with mother, you hurry up and get to work and make a lot of money." With bulging veins on Chi Heiran's forehead, he asked, "What else do you have in your heart besides money?" "There are you and mother." Seeing his father staring at him, he hastily added, "There is also the younger brother in mother's womb." Chi Heiran turned his head and said to Mu Yangling, "I think it's better to let the gentleman teach him. The master and Zijin were both taught by the master, and they are not crooked. I think he is not as good as before. At least he was not as good as before. It would make me so angry. Now my father is angry every 3 days, and the next day he is short-tempered. A few days ago, he followed his ass to the military camp. Master thought that he is my son, Chi Heiran, and it would be good to polish it in the military camp since he was a child. Was about to ask someone to take him to watch the soldiers on the school field, but he followed the master into the main tent, and congratulated him on getting rich. The face of the master was thrown at his grandma's house at that time. It's already February. He even stretched out his hand to beg for a red envelope. Is it embarrassing?" Mu Yangling hurriedly patted his chest to appease his anger, and said to his son, "Xiong, this is your fault, please apologize to your father." Little Xiong was puzzled and said, "But at that time, my uncles and uncles gave me all of it, and even praised me for my cleverness." Chi Heiran almost jumped. Is this a good word? At that time, Chi Heiran would have beaten him if he hadn't had a bad temper in front of many subordinates, but this kid came for the red envelope. The guard went home, and he was delayed because of something later, so he forgot about it for the time being, and only remembered today that he wanted to beat someone up. Mu Yangling also found that her son has been too picky recently, and it seems that he has overcorrected. Seeing that Chi Heiran was about to beat someone, he was about to stop him, but Xiao Xiong jumped off the chair and ran out cleverly, still holding the pillar in the corridor. When I came back, I shouted at Chi Heiran, "Father is unreasonable, and my uncles all praised me for being smart. Isn't this a good word or a bad word?" When Mu Yangling saw that Chi Heiran's kick was empty, he knew that he was not willing to beat his son, so he was relieved immediately, and stood on the side with his stomach to watch their father and son fight. Chi Heiran roared angrily, rushed up and caught him, and said angrily, "Today, I will teach you what is irony and what is truth." The little bear thumped in Chi Heiran's hand, and reached out to his mother hoarsely, "Mother, save me." It was just that Chi Heiran, who was holding the man in his hand, trembled in fright at his voice, and almost knocked him down. He patted his son's butt lightly, and shouted, "What are you shouting for? Master hasn't beaten him yet, and you." The little bear was frightened by his father, and was jumping with both feet in the air. Seeing that his father really didn't beat him, he cried even more fiercely, crying loudly, "Adults bullying children, villain, big villain." Chi Heiran hurriedly hugged him in his arms, but refused to admit defeat, saying, "That's because you are disobedient. Who dares to run outside when I beat my son? Who doesn't just stand obediently and be beaten?" Little Bear cried, and asked with tears all over his face, "Are they fools?" Chi Heiran saw him crying convulsively, but still looked at him curiously with his round eyes open. Chi Heiran sighed, stopped yelling and beating him, took him back and told him, Not everyone complimenting him is all good things. Some people say good things on the surface, but the meaning is not good. Some people scold you, but maybe it is not a literal insult. These words are too complicated. Xiao Xiang listened with starry eyes and completely forgot to cry. Chi Heiran also felt that it was a bit difficult for his son to understand this at this time, so he told him bluntly, "Your uncle said that you are smart, they are not praising you, but was mocking you, or forced to say that for the sake of father's face, that's called duplicity." Little Xiang was furious, wiped the tears off his face, and said bitterly, "They are too bad, they lied to me." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 797. Chi Heiran wrote to Chi Ziyuan angrily. He originally wanted to teach his son a lesson, but now he still beats him every year. I don't know if the boy understood what he said. Seeing that his handwriting was almost through the paper, Mu Yangling knew that he was still angry, so he shook his hand and said, "Okay, the child is like a piece of white paper, he doesn't understand anything, he's only 3 years old. Well, what we can teach him is limited, and what he can remember is also limited. Now that he knows that he can no longer get red envelopes after the first lunar month, he will naturally stop making such jokes in the future." Chi Heiran still kept his pen on the table, with a hint of anger on his face. "What's wrong with my son just asking them for a red envelope? How many people want to give him a red envelope but still can't? They dare to meet their eyes in front of my master. Ridiculous. What about privately?" Well, he protected himself again. Mu Yangling dragged a chair and sat beside him, propping his chin to listen to his anger. No matter how bad the son is, he is still his son. He can teach and teach, but he does not allow others to mock his son in this way. The few generals with sarcasm in their eyes these days have often been tortured by Chi Heiran. Chi Heiran said in a cold voice, "In half a year, if they are not capable enough to let the Lord ignore their loyalty, then the Lord will have to change another group of people." Mu Yangling was silent. Chi Ziyuan handed over such a large army to him, and handed him so many generals, in the hope that Chi Heiran would use Qianan as a base to train De Qi with generals who could lead troops to fight, because De Qi lacked talents, and these people were Chi Ziyuan had promised to give them preferential treatment for the bandit leaders recruited by the bandits before, so they became the first batch of generals to be trained, but after a year, Chi Heiran obviously had little effect. Perhaps it was because they surrendered too quickly before and had never fought against the army led by Chi Heiran, which made them very unconvinced by Chi Heiran, and even looked down upon De Qi. Except for 4 or 5 generals such as Lu Dehei and Lin Man, although the others have been trained terribly by Chi Heiran for more than a year, their arrogance is getting stronger and stronger. If Chi Heiran still admired their arrogance at the beginning, now he is extremely contemptuous. He has subdued their school captains, Qinhu and Beihu, and even the soldiers in the entire East and West Battalion obey him and the Emperor from the bottom of their hearts. However, these generals held their breath, refused to accept, remained unchanged, so unable to see the situation and their position clearly. How could Chi Heiran think highly of them? But this time they looked at Xiao Xiang with sarcasm, which obviously angered Chi Heiran. Didn't they just rely on Zheng Guiyan's credit to think that they have a part in this world? Now that their minions have been broken by him, he wants to see how they can maintain this arrogance. Now Chi Heiran is still willing to give them another chance. Half a year is enough time for one person to make a change. After half a year, if they still don't recognize themselves, but don't have the talent and ability to make him have to take a step back, then he will kill them, throw it to the mountain lump. There are not many other things in the army. Are there still few loyal and capable soldiers who want to climb up? As long as he works hard and ruthlessly, is he afraid that he will not be able to practice in the future? After thinking about it, Chi Heiran calmed down a bit, rolled up the paper on the table and threw it aside, pulled a blank piece of paper, wrote a letter to Chi Ziyuan, and said, "Xiaobao has already enlightened, and I see that Xiao Xiang has also reached his age, let him go to school too, Didn't the eldest brother find a husband for the little bear? You can't keep it for nothing, let him enlighten the little bear someday. But Xiong Kai-chun is only 4 years old. Boys mature late, so it may not be a good thing to study early. Mu Yangling hesitated and refused to agree. Let's wait another 2 years, and then go to school when he is 6 years old. Now he has to practice martial arts with you every day, and he has to go out to play. How can he have time to study? How about I teach him to read first, some simple words, tell him some truths every day, and then enlighten him when he is 6 years old. Chi Heiran had no choice but to say, it's really a loving mother with many failures. Going out to play is considered a serious matter? Open your eyes and look at the children of the officials in the court. Which one didn't start enlightenment at the age of 3 or 4? Xiaobao is still weak. Early enlightenment gone. Other people's homes are other people's homes. Didn't you see the old-fashioned look of those children when you returned to the capital this time? 5 or 6-year-old children look like 15 or 16 years old. Standing with a face, seeing the little bear playing with toys, his eyes are full of tears. Xingxian, but dare not move, dare not say a word. I don't want my son to become like this in the future. He is still young, at least I think he should play happily before he is 6 years old. As for after being enlightened at the age of 6, even if he wants to study, he should try to let him study happily. Studying is a lifetime thing, not just 10 or 8 years. Chi Heiran frowned, seeing that Aling persisted. He could only curl his lips and said, okay, but I still have to teach him his characters. Your block letters are not bad, but you have more than enough integrity and lack of backbone. You might as well follow me to write Willow style. He motioned her to look at his handwriting, and said triumphantly, my handwriting is even praised by my husband. Mu Yangling said faintly, that's because Mr. has nothing to boast about, so I can only pick up your words. You are jealous of me. Even Zijin said that his writing is not as good as mine. Chi Heiran wrote the letter while arguing, and sent the letter directly to the capital with his son's pigeon without leaving the official document. When Xiaobao received the letter, a big question mark popped up in his head. Brother Xiaoxiang sent him such a big letter? After dismantling it, it was found that it was written to the Emperor Father. Xiaobao took out the small note that was squeezed into the corner by his uncle's letter, and looked for the Emperor with a mournful face. It must be that his uncle wrote too much, and the pigeons could not carry so much. Brother Xiaoxiang can only write him such a small note. Xiaobao handed the letter to his father, and repeatedly told him, we must not use our carrier pigeons anymore. Brother Xiaoxiang still has a lot to say to me. He is going to cry. Qi Xiaoyuan twitched the corner of his mouth in response, and really wanted to ask his son, where do you have so many words that you can't finish every day? Qi Xiaoyuan opened the letter and saw that Chi Heiran suggested that both the cattle farm and the nursery should be managed by the royal family, and then be managed by Aling instead of being handed over to the court. One is that they are afraid that the role of cattle farms and nursery homes will be reduced or even disappear due to the conflict of interests in the imperial court. Second, handing them over to the royal family can improve the reputation of the royal family. The goodwill of the people. Qi Xiaoyuan knocked on the table and pondered. This kind of thing has always been done by the court. What the royal family has to do is to maintain the face of the royal family and restrain the descendants of the clan. The emperor represents the entire royal family. But it doesn't mean that the royal family can't do these things. Just like what Heiran said, the royal family will manage the cattle farm and the nursery. Not only will they be able to expand their operations, but it will also increase the prestige of the royal family. Even if they sit on the throne in the future, if the descendants are unworthy, there is still room for turning around. In the royal family, no one is more suitable than Mu Yangling. Although the person who runs the business has not changed, the name on the surface has changed. Qi Xiaoyuan agreed without thinking too much, and called Fan Zijin in the next day, saying, I want to take the cattle farm and nursery that Aling married into the royal family, and you take the list to choose some royal estates of similar value. I'll exchange it with her later. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 798. Fanzijin was stunned for a moment before he realized that, aside from the cattle farm, the nursery has a great influence, and it is an institution that attracts the hearts of the people. These years, the orphanage home no longer only accepts orphans from the people, but also orphans of fallen soldiers. The orphanage home will also allocate a part of the money to support and educate them. In addition, the workshop he hung under the 5th Battalion made Chi Ziyuan's original. The subordinates and the soldiers who came to defect followed them to fight the country wholeheartedly. Chi Ziyuan led his troops to the south, leaving only one army to guard the north. Why didn't he worry at all? Nurseries and rabbit meat workshops accounted for most of the reasons. At that time, the nursery had begun to take shape after several years of development, and Mu Yangling began to ask people to allocate 40% of the operating income of the nursery to take care of the orphans of soldiers who died in the army. Veterans and disabled soldiers, let the people who followed Chi Ziyuan to fight in the country be loyal to him, and the military and political boundaries are becoming less and less obvious. Chi Ziyuan's influence in the north is growing, and his reputation is getting stronger and stronger. Let go of the south to grab the throne, instead of staying in the north. In the past few years, the nursery has become bigger and bigger, but the reputation is not limited to the Mu family, because everyone knows that although the nursery was opened by a girl from the Mu family, it has long been married to the Chi family as her dowry. In fact, the nursery has always been protected by the army, so when people talk about this matter, they generally thank the Mu family, Mu Yangling, General Qi, and the Emperor. If the nursery is officially named under the royal family at this time, then the common people will only thank the royal family and Mu Yangling, who manages the place, and will no longer involve the Mu family. Chi Ziyuan said, the prefects of Xingzhou Prefecture and Jingzhou Prefecture once approached Mu Boan, wanting him to open the nursery to the two prefectures, but he can't make the decision on this matter, and Aling is not at ease to let the Mu family do this. If the nursery is under the name of the royal family, she will not have these worries. The Huangzhuang you choose for her should be near the capital as much as possible. The couple see that they have a lot of property, but their annual income in my own pocket. Speaking of this, Chi Ziyuan sighed slightly, and said, you haven't had any private money these few years. Fanzijin said with a playful smile, when the world is stable, will my cousin still lose our private money? That's not necessarily the case, Chi Ziyuan said with a straight face, maybe I'll leave you with nothing when I'm too short-tempered. At that time, I will bring my whole family to live in the palace in awe-inspiring way. I will use your food and drink, and save the furniture if I don't have any. Fanzijin joked with him seriously. The Emperor's House of Internal Affairs is managed by Fanzijin. Now there are 3 masters living in the palace, and the expenses are not high. In the previous dynasty, Emperor Jinjian also encircled a lot of land with the family. Although Chi Ziyuan released a batch after he ascended the throne, but there are still countless Huangzhuang estates under his name. Thinking that Heiran really didn't have much money, although it was Mu Yangling's dowry, the money he earned would end up in the pockets of Chi Heiran and Xiao Xiang. So Fanzijin chose 3 good farms for them with great care, and divided each farm. Write down the details and ask someone to send them to choose 2 of them. When Chi Heiran saw the geographical location and the size and fertility of the 3 farms, he was secretly dumbfounded, and said, Zijin has picked out the 3 best Huangzhuangs of the eldest brother, right? I'm not afraid that a few uncles in the clan will block at his door. It can be used as Huangzhuang. The area is naturally not small, the smallest one on it has 68 hectares, the geographical location is so good that Chi Heiran's eyes are red, and this is not given in the name of WeaktoStrong, but in exchange Mu Yangling's work was left to Mu Yangling, that is to say, this farm can be bought and sold. Chi Heiran drooled at the 3 farms, leaned over to his wife, and asked, which 2 do you want to choose? I think all 3 are good. Mu Yangling frowned and said, why are they all in Jiangnan? Zijin chose it for us because of selfishness. Chi Heiran looked at his wife and said, don't tell me that you don't like the land in the south of the Yangtze River. An acre of high-quality land here is worth 2 acres of high-quality land in the Northland. Jiangnan isn't bad, but it's too eye-catching, Mu Yangling said in a low voice. Brother naturally won't say anything. I'm afraid that the other uncles of the Qi family will really go to block Zijin's door, and we won't either. To make it too difficult for him. Then we can just choose one, as long as you don't feel at a loss. Huangzhuang is not only in the south of the Yangtze River, there are many other places. Mu Yangling rolled his eyes and said, just choose the smallest one in the south of the Yangtze River, and then ask Zijin to choose a bigger one for us in the Beijing area. Huangzhuang. Chi Heiran glanced at Mu Yangling, held her in his arms, and asked in a low voice, you know that elder brother wants to move the capital. Mu Yangling's eyes widened, and she said ah in surprise. Chi Heiran hurriedly covered her mouth, and said in a low voice, forget it, you won't know it just by looking at it. Mu Yangling hugged his neck and asked, brother wants to move the capital? Where are you going? Chi Heiran snorted, and said, when the homeland is taken back, it is natural to move back to Chang'an, where it is easy to defend and difficult to attack. It is a natural capital. Mu Yangling frowned. No matter how difficult it is to attack, Jinbing is not the same as attacking. And the economic development there is already full. If you move back, so many people will move back together, and the place that was originally relatively loose will become crowded again. It's not as good as stay in Jiangnan. But the capital city is located in the south, but the danger lies in the west and north. A quiet corner is not conducive to the advancement of children and grandchildren. Mu Yangling's heart moved, and he said, it doesn't have to be Chang'an, there are many places in the north. Seeing Chi Heiran's brows were tightly frowned, Mu Yangling said, you still have half of the land that you have not taken back. It's too early for these things, let's train our troops and take back our homeland. My lord didn't intend to talk about it at this time. Isn't this the Huangzhuang that you want to protect suddenly, so why did you ask too much? I chose Beijing because the land is sparsely populated and the water and soil are good, but the value of Huangzhuang is not high. Even if I choose Huangzhuang, the largest one in Beijing, no one will say anything. A little further up Beijing is the area occupied by Jinren, so the value of Huangzhuang over there is not high, and even the seeding rate in Huangzhuang is not high. Beijing is General Yuan's territory. With him here, we don't have to worry about the Jin people going south to invade. At that time, we can move some people there, so we won't be afraid of the problem of farming. Chi Heiran thought forward, nodded and said, okay, then choose a bigger Huangzhuang in Beijing. Chi Heiran wrote a letter to Fan Zijin, while Fan Zijin was blocked at home by the head of the Qi clan. Fan Zijin is in charge of the Emperor's House of Internal Affairs, but he can't do everything. There are people who work under him, and most of these people are Qi Ziyuan's confidants, such as Manager Zhu. They used to be servants of the Qi family. After becoming the Emperor, they naturally rose and became officials of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. And except that they are the children of the Qi family, they have no ability to become officials, so they work as officials in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, helping the Emperor manage the farm shop and other businesses. So Fan Zijin took away the data and title deeds of the 3 Huangzhuang, and the Qi clan chief soon found out. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 799. Qi Shan came to inquire about what he wanted the 3 Huangzhuangs for. He suspected that the emperor was short of money, so he asked Fan Zijin to realize the 3 Huangzhuangs. Everyone knows that the national treasury is short of money, and now it is approaching the New Year's spring plowing. It is time to use the money. Generally, Huangjong is not only given to the children of the royal family, but also handed over to the people in the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Fan Zijian suddenly took the land deed away. He couldn't help but be suspicious. If the guess came true, he felt that he would stop him whatever he said. This Huangjong is the face of the royal family, how can it be used to realize it? Fan Zijian heard Qi Shan's meaning, rolled his eyes, and said, Shibo looks down on me, Fan Zijian too much, can I sell the emperor's Huangjong? If the treasury is short of money, my business will support it. Qi Shan hesitated and said, then what are you doing with the land deed? Of course there are other uses, so don't ask, this matter is approved by the emperor. Fan Zijian served tea to see off the guests. Qi Shan hesitated for a while, but still didn't have the guts to ask Qi Ziyuan. If you want to blame, you can blame Qi Feng for doing too much back then, and the Qi family has always turned a blind eye to the two brothers. With the children of the Qi clan, they didn't dare to enter the palace to ask for favors. Didn't they see that the emperor's two concubines kept shrinking their necks to live their lives and never got a job? Qi Shan left hesitantly, and within 2 days, the emperor officially decreed to bestow a Huangjong in Jiangnan and Beijing to Mu Yangling, thanking her for her outstanding contribution to the royal family. Only then did everyone know that the emperor took back the cattle farm and nursery in Baidi and put them under the royal family's management. Whether it is a cattle farm or a nursery, from its establishment to the present, there have been shadows of the emperor and King Rong standing behind it, but the emperor did not take it back to the court, but to the royal family, which made everyone unacceptable. The Ministry of Internal Affairs never gets involved in this kind of thing, and the court should be responsible for this kind of thing. Regardless of whether it is a cattle farm or a nursery, the interests involved in the latter are not small, so many officials who are interested in this have offered discounts. The officials of the Ministry of Internal Affairs were also shocked, and wanted to take the errand into their own hands. Sitting at home, Fan Zijian sneered when he saw this. The emperor said that it was received by the royal family, not the Ministry of Internal Affairs, nor the imperial family. How many people are there in the royal family now? Those people can't understand the meaning even after hearing an imperial decree. The emperor obviously didn't expect that everyone couldn't even understand the imperial decree. He even found the imperial decree and read it carefully from top to bottom. The adjective is a little more subtle, and the others are clearly written, which can also distort the holy meaning. If it's not your fault, it's someone else's fault. Seeing his downcast face, the queen smiled and said, it's inevitable. After all, there has never been a royal family in all dynasties that has deliberately classified certain things as royal management. It was either handed over to the court or the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Qi Ziyuan snorted coldly, I think they didn't pay attention because they were driven by interests, right? Anyone can build a cattle farm, but only the royal family can run a nursery. If they want to run it, they can build one themselves. It worked out pretty well. Qi Ziyuan didn't bother to watch them toss, and directly ordered them to read Shuowenjizi carefully. He also formally ordered Mu Yangling to take charge of the two places, telling them clearly that anyone can build a cattle farm, but they are not allowed to enclose the land to harm the interests of the common people. It can only be built with the consent of the royal family. The chaotic fight subsided immediately. Although the officials of the DPRK and China felt sorry, they had no objection, because this was Mu Yangling's dowry in the first place, and she could manage it. On the side of the Qi clan, everyone's thoughts are a little subtle. Many old people and children in the clan approached the patriarch Qi Shan and asked, didn't you say that they were exchanged for 2 Huangjong? Then this thing belongs to our Qi clan, how can you let someone with a foreign surname take care of it? Yes, the children of the clan don't study well, so it's fine if they can't pass the imperial examination to become an official. They can still manage the cattle farm and the nursery. You see, the children of our Chi family occupy only a few places in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and there are a large group of children who are unemployed at home. We must find something for them to do. Qi Shanneng still sat in the position of patriarch after Qi Ziyuan ascended the throne, relying on Qi Ziyuan's support, so he knew which thoughts he could have and which things he could never touch. At this moment, he yelled angrily at several people, "The foreign surname people? The person you are talking about has a foreign surname, followed the emperor and King Rong all the way to conquer the country, and gave birth to the eldest son of King Rong. You stand in front of the emperor and see if he recognizes you or the Chimu family." I said that these two belong to the royal family, not the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and not the clan. Qi Shan stared at them and said, "Are you from the royal family? Are you? Why don't you just stay aside, let alone you?" Qi Shan said. Pointing to the southwest, he snorted coldly, "Those two, as long as the emperor doesn't let go, they are not considered royal family. Just go back and stay honestly. If you want a good position, go back and study for the imperial examination by yourself. If not, just be honest, squat down. Whenever there is a vacancy in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, it will be on top." Qi Shan saw that some people were still not convinced, so he sneered and said, "If you are not convinced, you can pass your son to the palace to ask for an audience. Speaking of which, the emperor is still your brother." Everyone lowered their heads timidly. The young people who were in their 20s bullied Qi Heiran when they were young, especially the young people who were about 30 years old. They beat the emperor together when they were young. Although they were young at that time, the emperor would not care about fighting with them, but at that time they were not just fighting. When bullying him, they could say whatever was unpleasant. They were not sure whether the emperor remembered this. Who would dare to go to the palace to find the emperor? Mu Yangling's actions were also fast. Almost as soon as he received the imperial decree, he notified Mu Boan and Niu Chang, officially hung up the sign of the royal family, and then publicized it in the north, so that Mu Boan and Jingzhou prefecture of Xingzhou prefecture, he contacted the prefect to open 2 small kindergartens on a trial basis in the 2 places. Except for the brand change, the people and rules inside have not changed. After 2 days of worrying, the children and employees were relieved to see that everything was as usual. Because the spring plowing was about to begin, Mu Yangling first dispatched nearly 3,000 cattle to distribute to the various prefectures. Except for Jingzhou, Hanzhong, and Xingzhou prefectures, the Tongchuan prefecture benefited the most. Mu Yangling told Qi Ziyuan that there are limited cattle in the cattle farm, and they can only be pushed slowly from north to south, and it is impossible to lead them to the south at once. Qi Ziyuan also understood this truth, suppressed his impatience and let Mu Yangling make up his own mind. The cows in the cattle farm are not given to the local government for free. They have to exchange things or pay money, or they can lease them in the form of lease. Unlike the previous leases that were only available during busy farming seasons, this time the cattle farm directly contacted the local officials. Lease cattle to them for a period ranging from 2 to 5 years. After the period expires, they can repay the rent with grain, money, or calves. Calculated, they only need to pay 2 buckets of rice a year, which is ridiculously cheap. However, in order to prevent local officials from using cattle for profit, they have strict regulations on the whereabouts of cattle. They must limit the use of cattle to poor farmers' homes as much as possible. It's not that Mu Yangling discriminated against them, but that Qi Ziyuan's purpose of expanding the cattle farm was originally for the poor peasants. If the cattle were rented out to the landlords again, why did she work so hard? The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 800. Because Bowen has to take the township examination 2 years later, he can no longer take care of the nursery, and now that the nursery belongs to the royal family, it must be separated from the Mu family, so Mu Yangling began to let Bowen and the people she sent hand over. After she finished these things by remote control, It was already April and the weather started to heat up. Her belly was getting bigger like a blown balloon, and she was unavoidably irritable. It got better. When Chi-Heiran came back, he felt chilly as soon as he entered the room, which was completely different from the sweltering heat outside. Xiaoxiang was sitting obediently beside his mother, holding a picture book and reading. It was a story book. Chi-Heiran drew it well, and Mu Yangling matched the story. Of course, in order to cultivate his son's correct aesthetics of fonts, the text of the story was also written by Chi-Heiran. Once, when he saw his father coming in, he slid off the bed with the book in his hand, and ran to his father. "Daddy, tell me a story." Chi-Heiran picked him up and put him on the couch, and said, "Let your mother tell you." Little Xiang pouted, "Mother's speech is not as good as yours, I want to listen to you." If it was usual, Chi-Heiran would definitely be proud, but today he just answered absent-mindedly, and took the storybook and read it to him according to the above. Little Bear became angry, pulled the storybook and stuffed it into his mother's hand, saying, "Mom, tell me." Mu Yangling also took a surprised look at Chi-Heiran. In the past, he told stories to little bears vividly. Some of them called animals like zoology. When he met a serious gentleman with a straight face and imitated his words, not only the little bear was fascinated by it, but sometimes I was so attracted that my eyes widened and I listened to his stories. What happened today? However, Mu Yangling took the storybook and opened his favorite story and told him before seeing the little bear's angry look. Chi-Heiran got up and walked outside, beckoned Li Shun, frowned and asked, "It's only late April, why did you put an ice basin?" Li Shun bowed his head and said, "These days are really hot and stuffy. The princess can't sleep at noon, and even eats half of the meal. I asked the Dr. Wang to come and see him. The Dr. Wang said it was a bitter summer, but he couldn't take medicine or drink ice things, so it can only be filled with ice basins." Chi-Heiran frowned slightly, and said, "In the evening, put one less ice basin, ask someone to clean up the waterside pavilion, put light gauze around it, and carry a wider wooden couch over there. The princess will rest there at noon, and the people in the house use less ice basins." He also asked the cook to ask about the princess's diet carefully. Hearing that Mu Yangling couldn't even finish a bowl of rice at noon today, she immediately said angrily, "If you can't even cook a meal, what do you need? The princess doesn't like to eat, just do other things. If she doesn't eat it, it's because you didn't do well. This is a bit unreasonable." Who would have thought that Mu Yangling, who always eats delicious food, will have a bitter summer after pregnancy? Chi-Heiran saw that the cook was trembling, so he turned his head to Fei Bai and said, "Go out and find a cook who is good at making refreshing side dishes. Light dishes are the main thing. Since the princess has a bad appetite, let me feed her." Fei Bai responded. Li Shun and the others bowed and retreated with the trembling cook. In the evening, Mu Yangling had diarrhea and got up 3 times at night, which made Chi-Heiran very worried, so he called the Dr. Wang to come over overnight, and his face was still stinky after learning that there was no serious problem. Mu Yangling felt a little guilty, took his hand and said, "It's all my fault for not paying attention to the cold. Don't be angry, I will pay more attention in the future, and don't ask them to put the ice basin." Chi-Heiran held her in his arms, touched her growing belly, and said, "This child is too much trouble for you. Now he is 6 months old, why are you still so lethargic? It's still a bitter summer, only 7 or 8, you've lost a lot of weight in just a few days." Chi-Heiran squeezed Mu Yangling's arm, feeling even more distressed, obviously plump a lot before, a pair of arms bullying Frost Sigxu, chubby, fleshy to the touch, similar to the arms of Xiaoxiangaja, but after only a few days of work, the arm felt like it was full of bones again. Chi-Heiran gently touched her stomach, and said in a low voice, "Wait until he comes out, and see if I don't spank his ass." Mu Yangling burst out laughing, and sighed, "I'm afraid you won't be able to bear it when the time comes." Master must be willing to do so. Little Xiong is going to beat him up. Could it be that he can't? Mu Yangling looked at him contemptuously, and asked quietly, since when did you beat the little bear? Those few butt slaps don't count. Are you beating him or dusting him? Chi Heiran blushed. So don't say that a loving mother is a loser, their family is a loving father who loses a lot. I ask someone to clean up the water pavilion. It's cool there. You can go there to take a nap at noon. I'll ask Mrs. Lu to come over and talk to you and relax. Didn't Dr. Wang say it? You're in a better mood. Maybe Ku Xia will be here soon, it's not that serious anymore. Mu Yangling yawned, and muttered, I'm not familiar with Mrs. Lu, so I have to entertain her when she comes, so let's forget it. Besides, I have to sleep 8 or 9 hours a day, so I can't just talk and go to sleep. How rude is that? Chi Heiran began to meditate, and the next day Mu Yangling moved to the waterside pavilion to rest, because there was a light gauze covering it, so mosquitoes couldn't get in, and the gauze was breathable, and when the breeze blew, the summer heat would be relieved by 3 points. Coming here near the water, the temperature is lower than other places. Mu Yangling didn't feel stuffy, but his appetite was still bad. He was obviously very hungry, but he didn't have any appetite when he saw the food. She can only force herself to eat, and she can't starve the child in her belly. Chi Heiran looked at Mu Yangling swallowing food with a white face, feeling very distressed. He picked up a chopstick of green vegetables for her, and said, eat this pressure. Mu Yangling looked down and saw that the green vegetables were shiny with oil, and she almost spit it out. She turned her head and swallowed the mouthful of rice, shaking her hands and saying, no, I can't eat any more, you can eat. Chi Heiran saw that there was still half of the rice in her bowl, his eyes flashed with worry, but he nodded, helped her to sit on the couch, and said, then you rest for a while, my son, and I will accompany you after dinner, say. Little Bear looked at his mother worriedly, and when he was about to ask a question, his father turned his head away, hurry up and eat, and give your mother a show after dinner. If you can make your mother happy, Dad will take you to a horse race tomorrow. The little bear quickly stuffed the food into his mouth. Chi Heiran sighed slightly, and asked someone to guard in the kitchen. At night, when Mu Yangling woke up from hunger, he would spend the night in plain water and put a handful of vegetables for her to eat, without any oil. After finishing a small bowl of noodles, Chi Heiran heaved a sigh of relief, and said with a smile, you like to eat like this, and I will let them do it again tomorrow. Mu Yangling nodded, I hope I can still eat it tomorrow. Chi Heiran hugged her and smiled, it's definitely possible. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 801. As the months get bigger and the weather gets hotter, Mu Yangling has less and less food to eat. Chi Heiran is very anxious to see her face that has gained some flesh due to pregnancy quickly lose weight, but in the face of Mu Yang was smiling when he was young. Even Little Bear didn't go out to play, and stayed with his mother every morning after practicing kung fu, performing shows for her, and studying for her obediently. Mu Yangling knew that the father and son were trying to please her, and she was also a little anxious, but she just didn't want to eat, greasy or non-greasy, and she lost her appetite when she saw it. She thought the pregnancy was easy, but who would have thought it would be bitter? Summer. Obviously there were no problems when she was pregnant with the bear. Chi Heiran sat on the chair with a sullen face, and looked coldly at the Dr. Wang and the 3 doctors who were kneeling below. In the end, Imperial Physician Wang withstood the pressure and said, my lord, if I let the princess go to a cooler place, maybe it will be fine. Don't you know, Chi Heiran was angry, but tell me, where can you escape the summer heat in the whole of Lingnan? Physician Wang was silent for a moment. Although it rained from time to time in Lingnan this year, the temperature was very high, which was much higher than last year. The old man who was born and raised in Jesu also said that he had never seen it so hot in May. Fortunately, it took a while there can be a rain, otherwise this year's crop harvest is still unknown. I could have used the ice basin to cool down, but I don't know the reason. Every time I use the ice basin, the princess will catch cold and have diarrhea. It is useless to cover her stomach with a small blanket. It was like getting into the stomach and intestines. Wang Tai was helpless, and the doctors invited from all over Lingnan were also helpless. After the princess moved into the water pavilion, the situation has indeed improved a little, but now the weather is getting hotter and hotter, and the temperature in the water pavilion is also gradually rising, so it is of no use at all. Chi Heiran saw that everyone was silent, so he snorted coldly, shook his sleeves and left, saying, "I want to go on." When Chi Heiran arrived at the main courtyard, there was a lot of laughter inside. He stood at the door, adjusted his facial expression, and went in with a smile. Mu Yangling was sitting on the couch, and the two little girls beside her were fanning her. The little bear was sitting stuffing cherries into his mouth while stuffing his mother's mouth. When he saw his father coming in, he jumped off the couch and pulled him. He came over with his hand, pointed to the cherries on the plate and said proudly, "This is a cherry, brought by Uncle Feibai, it's delicious." Chi Heiran saw that Mu Yangling saw that she did not feel nauseated after eating the handful given to her by the bear, so he breathed a sigh of relief, touched his son's head with a smile, and said, "Eat more if it tastes good. I'll find you again." Mu Yangling asked curiously, "It's only May, how come there are cherries for sale?" Unlike the previous life, which was launched in June of the Gregorian calendar, it was only available in June of the lunar calendar, which was around July in the previous life, and the fruits in this world may be due to various reasons such as sunshine and fertilizers. It was about a month later. She used to find cherries at the market in mid-June, but now there are cherries in mid-May. Chi Heiran said indifferently, "This year's weather is hotter than in previous years, and the fruits will naturally ripen faster. Although they haven't appeared in the market yet, the orchards have already started selling them. I'll just ask someone to go to the orchard to buy them." Fresh early season fruits are always provided to officials and wealthy businessmen first, because they can afford the price. Mu Yangling nodded as usual. Chi Heiran saw her eating a dozen or so in a row. The corners of his mouth unavoidably turned up slightly, and he held her hand and said, "What fruit do you want to eat? I'll ask someone to find it for you." Mu Yangling tilted his head and said, "I can't tell if you ask me to order. See what's on the market, and you can buy some for me. I'll try to see what I can eat." Chi Heiran nodded, but he had already thought of several fruits in his mind, maybe the cherries he ate in the afternoon as an appetizer, and Mu Yangling accidentally ate rice all night. Chi Heiran was very happy. That night, he ordered Feibai to find more fruits. When Feibai heard the fruits Chi Heiran ordered, he couldn't help smiling bitterly. These were all early season fruits, and it was not certain whether they were available, let alone ripe. He had searched for this cherry for a long time and paid a lot of money to buy it, but the prince valued the princess very much, so he didn't dare to say that he couldn't do it at this time. He couldn't do it, and there were people who wanted to do things for the prince and concubine with their brains broken. Feibai restrained his emotions, nodded solemnly, and said, "My lord, the duke and the others will arrive in about 3 days. My little one, I have already sent people to clean up the house. Do you think there is anything else that needs to be prepared? I'll leave it to Zuliang to tidy up the house. You should take care of the princess first. I might come back later tomorrow." Chi Heiran rushed to the west camp after arranging the military camp early the next morning, leaving Lu Qing, who came to look for him, in vain. Chi Heiran went to look for Lu Dehei. To be precise, he was looking for Lu Dehei's wife, Jinhua. Not long ago, Jinhua gave birth to a son for Lu Dehei, Lu Dehe was very happy, seeing everyone look dumb. There was no way, he only had the son when he was over the age, naturally he was very precious. Seeing the prince coming, the first sentence is, "My lord, it's just right for you to go and see my son, he looks very strong." The lieutenants standing behind Lu Dehe wished they could tuck their heads into their crotches. The prince has always been diligent in political affairs, so he must have something important to come here at this time. You didn't talk about official business, but your son, isn't that just a joke? As soon as Lu De Black words came out, he felt bad, so he immediately shut his mouth tightly, straightened his back, and was about to explain a few words, when he heard Chi Heiran say, "Okay, I haven't seen your son before, let's go first take a look at your house." Lu Dehe was dumbfounded, and the lieutenants behind Lu Dehe were also dumbfounded. Chi Heiran got on his horse, looked down at Lu Dehe, frowned and said, "What are you still doing in a daze? Hurry up and get on the horse, it's already half noon, and I have to go back in the afternoon." Seeing the subordinates in the row behind Lu Dehe, he waved his hands and said, "You don't have to follow, go to train." Lu Dehe led Chi Heiran home anxiously. Chi Heiran really looked down at his son for a while, nodded and praised, "It looks very strong, almost comparable to that of Little Bear when he was a child." Lu Dehe knew that Xiao Xiong was born prematurely. Back then, the princess wrote a letter to the prince, but he intercepted the letter. His son was born at full term. He didn't believe that his son was not as good as Xiao Shizi, but this he only dared to say it in his heart. Chi Heiran gave the child a jade pendant and asked, "Where's his mother?" Lu Dehe was taken aback, and hurriedly said, "Jinhua is busy in the kitchen." Seeing Chi Heiran's expression was indifferent, he said tentatively, "The humble job, let her come out to meet the prince." Chi Heiran nodded and said, "Let her come over." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 802. Lu Dehe's heart trembled. What does the prince need to find Jinhua? Could it be related to the Miao people? But I haven't heard of conflicts between the Miao and Han recently. Instead, because the corn seeds and upland rice seeds that Fengshao grain shop promoted to them gave them a good harvest of grain, the relationship has eased a lot. The Miao Han Academy was established to teach the Miao people to learn Chinese, and the Han people to learn Miao language, which made the relationship between the two parties a lot better. When the father-in-law came to visit his son last time, the father-in-law asked him what gift he should give for his son's birthday. Could it be that the two sides broke up in just a few days? Lu Dehe frightened and asked someone to invite Jinhua to come over, and looked carefully at the prince's expression. Chi Heiran lowered his eyes, drank tea quietly, without showing any expression on his face. When he saw Jinhua coming in, he raised his head to look at her, his eyes could not help showing a little envy. Not long after Jinhua gave birth, she was chubby, twice as big as before. If it was before, Chi Heiran would definitely not take a second look at it once, but at this moment, in Chi Heiran's eyes however, it is a baby. If Aling can be so fat, he can wake up with a smile in his dreams. Chi Heiran straightened his back slightly, motioned for Jinhua to sit down, and asked her how her diet was recently, whether it was bitter summer, what she liked to eat more, and where did she use the cook. Lu Dehe's face became more and more ugly. Even he, a husband, didn't care about these questions. Why did the prince ask Jinhua about these things for no reason? Jinhua also thought it was weird, but she couldn't think of anything wrong, so she answered honestly. Although she was the first child, she didn't feel any discomfort except for a little morning sickness in the first month. Chi Heiran was slightly disappointed, and asked, "The weather is so hot, do you have no adverse reactions?" Jinhua tilted her head slightly and asked, "Does it count if you don't want to eat?" Chi Heiran was shocked, and nodded again and again, "This counts." Chi Heiran looked at her with piercing eyes, and asked, "You have a bad appetite?" Lu Dehe looked back and forth at the two of them strangely. Why did the prince seem very happy when his wife couldn't eat? It was hot a few days ago, I had a bad appetite, and I didn't want to eat anything. What about now? Chi-Heiran looked at her with bright eyes. It's much better now. The doctor prescribed 2 doses of medicine, and the kitchen also cooked me more light and appetizing meals. Chi-Heiran frowned slightly. Do you still have the prescription? Lu Dehe thought of the rumors he had heard recently, and had a vague guess in his heart, so he hurriedly asked someone to bring the prescription. Chi-Heiran took a look, and his brows were furrowed even more. He knew this prescription. It was a prescription for relieving summer heat and invigorating the stomach. Dr. Wang had several prescriptions that were better than this one, but Aling had taken 2 or 3 doses and it was useless. I was pregnant and couldn't drink more medicine. After 2 days of drinking, I saw no effect and refused to drink any more. Although Chi-Heiran was a little disappointed, the purpose of his trip was not here, but he asked, "You grew up in Lingnan, and I heard that your father often took you around. Have you been to many places in Lingnan?" Jinhua nodded, patted her chest proudly and said, "My father loves me, and when I go out, I will take my elder brother with me. I have been to many places." "Then do you know where is the best place to escape the heat?" Chi-Heiran emphasized. "It is suitable for pregnant women to escape the heat." "Is it the princess who wants to go out to escape the heat?" Jinhua tilted her head and said, "You Han people are really particular, you have to go out to escape the heat every summer." Cough. Lu Dehe coughed lightly, interrupted Jinhua's words, and said in a low voice, "Just tell me, is there any place in Lingnan that is cooler in summer to avoid the heat?" Jinhua curled her lips and said, "I mean yes, can you build a house now?" Chi-Heiran said in a deep voice, "You just need to say whether you have it or not, and where it is, and you don't have to worry about other things." Jinhua rolled her eyes and said, "Yes, not to mention far away, there is a big mountain spring in the Bisha tribe, there is a small valley there, and there is a dense forest, so it is very cool. Every June and July are the hottest months. You have to cover the quilt at night to stay there. I heard from my father that there is a vent there, and there are a lot of water and trees, so it is very cool. There are a lot of poisonous insects, snakes, and ants in the territory of the Sand tribe. Can you Han people live there? Is there anything else besides this one?" "Yes, but it's even more impossible for you to go to those places, such as the peak of Hoarij and the valley bottom of Kinja. Do you dare to take your wife to live in these places?" Jinhua laughed and said, "It's only summer, do you need to make such a fuss?" Chi-Heiran turned his head and turned to Luda, "I'll take the cooks from your house home for 2 days, and I'll ask someone to find some for you." "No, no," Lu Dehe waved his hands hurriedly and said, "it's their blessing that the prince sees them. You can just take them away, and you can send them back to the humble post after you don't need them. As for the new cook, you don't have to. Well, there are still a few usable people on the stove, so don't worry." Chi-Heiran nodded, got up and said, "Then I will take my leave first." Lu Dehe hurriedly sent people out, while asking the cook to tidy up quickly and go with Chi-Heiran. Chi-Heiran came empty-handed, and brought 3 more cooks with him when he left. Lu Dehe wiped the sweat from his forehead when he saw the people walking away, and sighed, "The prince is really affectionate to the princess. He even ran over by himself. The most important thing is that he can still ask Jinhua those daily questions so carefully that Lu Dehe will suspect that the princess is usually served by the prince himself. He thinks he loves his wife enough, but he will ask her sooner." Later he really didn't know what he ate or how much he ate, and it was even more impossible for him to ask in person. Lu Dehe went back with a sigh, and saw Jinhua curling her lips, muttering, "The Han people are really delicate." Lu Dehe explained, "The princess is in a special situation. I heard that the prince is looking for a doctor like crazy. He can't eat anything and he is pregnant. Don't you be in a hurry. I didn't have these problems when I was pregnant." Lu Dehe said with a smile, "Everyone is different from each other. I heard that the princess didn't feel so uncomfortable when she was pregnant with a young son, but it's really too hot in Lingnan this year. It's only May. I can't wait to take off my clothes when I go out. It was already dark when Chiharan brought them back to the mansion. He didn't even let the cooks rest, he immediately asked someone to take them to the kitchen, let them cook some light and appetizing dishes first. Chiharan hurried to wash up to the dining room. Mu Yangling was watching the little bear eat beautifully. Whenever she saw the little bear eating happily, Mu Yangling would eat a little more, so now she is eating with her son.